I've saved my progress as firststyledpage.ai found inside the '08 type folder. Now, you may notice that we have a big styled rectangle that covers up everything else on the first artboard of the document. That's obviously no good. I need to send that rectangle to the back of the stack. I also need to duplicate it a couple of times to create the pages on artboards 2 and 3 of the document. And in doing so, I can show you a new trick that works somewhat well inside of Illustrator CS5. I think it's actually a very odd little trick, but you might want to take advantage of it. It's a method for selecting through objects to other objects inside of the program. So here's what we're going to do. Start by selecting the big rectangle on the first artboard. And notice that we now have here inside the Layers panel a small orange square indicating that there is a selected object on the text objects layer. I'm going to create a new layer in back of that layer by clicking on the guides layer, and then pressing and holding the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and clicking the little page icon down at the bottom of the Layers panel to bring up the Layer Options dialog box. We're creating a new layer, so I'll call it Pages, and then I'll change the color of that layer from green to violet and click OK. And we now have a new Pages layer. Let's go ahead and move the selected rectangle onto it by dragging the orange square down from the text objects layer and dropping it onto the Pages layer like so. Now we have a rectangle behind the text objects, which is exactly what we want. However, notice if I try to drag it, and I'm going to drag it by its center point. The reason is I want that center point to snap into alignment with the center guideline on the next artboard. Otherwise, I'd have to get one of these corner points to snap into alignment with the corners of the artboard, and that's not going to be so easy. So much easier to snap things into alignment with existing guidelines. However, if I tried to drag that center point like so, I end up selecting the text that's in front of it. That's no good. So I'll go ahead and press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that movement. Notice that the text is still, however, selected. If I press and hold the Control key or the Command key on the Mac, notice that I switch temporarily to the white arrow tool. And if I try to click at that location where the center point used to be, which I think is about right there, just slightly above that horizontal guideline, if I click at that location, nothing happens. However, my cursor does change. All of a sudden, it now gets a little caret next to it. So I still have the Control key down or the Command key on the Mac. And now I'll click again at that location. And if I'm in luck, if I happen to nail that center point, which I did, I'll go ahead and select that purple rectangle. Now, what in the world's going on? Well, inside of CS5, sometimes control clicking or command clicking on a selected object will select the object immediately in back of it. And for that technique to work, you have to have one checkbox turned on and another turned off, which is a really weird thing that I've never seen anybody demonstrate. I'll go ahead and press Control-K, Command-K on the Mac in order to bring up the Preferences dialog box, switch from General to Selection and Anchor Display. And notice there it is, Control-Click to select objects behind. That's going to be Command-Click to select objects behind on the Mac. That needs to be turned on as by default, but also object selection by path only needs to be turned off. So it's a combination of this checkbox being off and this one being on that makes that technique work. Now you might say, well, Deke, you're a liar because look, both checkboxes are turned on and you just got it to work, buddy, so it must not work that way. Well, had I been working with path outlines and path outlines only, that is, I was trying to select through one path outline to another, I would have to make sure this checkbox was turned off and this one was turned on. However, I was trying to select through a text object to a rectangle below, and in that case, you need this checkbox right there turned on, and I'll go ahead and switch over to type. This checkbox right there, text object selection by path only, turned off as by default in order for this specific technique that I'm showing you right now to work. So, in other words, for 90% of the stuff that we've done in this series so far, we do not need this technique at all because we can already select through objects to the objects behind them thanks to the fact that we have object selection by path only turned on. Does that make any sense? I hope so. This is just weird. Anyway, I'm going to click Cancel. If you're having problems selecting through one object to another, you might want to give this a try. Again, what you do is you press the Control key on the PC or the Command key on the Mac, click in order to switch back and forth between these objects like so. And as you're clicking, you'll see that little sideways caret next to your arrow cursor. All right, anyway, here's another important thing. If I go ahead and select this rectangle as I have, I can see the purple center point. If I try to drag it again, I'm going to get the same old problem. So I'm going to drag the text again. So what good was this technique? It's not getting us anywhere. Well, press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac once again, if you can remember where that center point is, it's just slightly above the horizontal guideline, along the vertical guideline. Press and hold the control key or the command key on the Mac. I'll click. All right, now I've got the proper cursor. That's what I want. And then click and hold this time. I still have the control key down, the command key on the Mac. And now I can drag that rectangle around. It's a strange technique, but it can work. And I'll go ahead and drop that guy into place and then press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that maneuver. If you just can't get it to work, you can take advantage of a much simpler technique, in my opinion. I just want you to know the new stuff. The much simpler way is to just go ahead and lock down the text objects layer by clicking in that column next to the eyeball. And now I can easily select anything on the rectangle layer because everything above it is locked and therefore not selectable. All right, so again, I'll go ahead and press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac. Now I'll drag the center point like so until it aligns with the vertical guideline on the second artboard. And I want to get my cursor more or less into place, but I don't have to get the rectangle exactly where I want it. In other words, up and down, it isn't positioned properly. So I'll press the Shift key in order to make sure that I'm performing a strictly horizontal drag. And then I'll press and hold the Alt key as well. So I have Shift and Alt down or Shift and Option on the Mac. I get that double arrowhead cursor that's showing me I've got a snap and I'm going to drop a clone. And then I'll release my mouse button. And then I'll release the Shift and Alt keys or the Shift and Option keys on the Mac in order to clone that second page into place. I'm scrolling the pages over, obviously, and then I'll press Control-D, Command-D on the Mac in order to create a duplicate of that rectangle on the third and final artboard. And that is how I go about creating my 3 rectangles behind all of the text objects inside of this document. In the next exercise, we're going to add a few more fill and stroke attributes, and then we'll update our graphic style.